Well, hello friends, this here is David Vos. Today is going to be a little different. Today is February 10th, 2016. Can't remember what day it is. And today I've got my puppies with me. And I'm going to let them go out and play while I talk. But they're cuties. I love them very much. And it's a beautiful day here in New Mexico. Out you go, guys. So, a lot to talk about today. Well, and again, I don't know where to begin. We left off talking about Nibiru and Orion, Sirius, Cyrus. I end up calling it Cyrus all the time. I guess people call it Sirius. So, we talked about how Sirius was 8.6 light years from Earth, and we're in the gravitational pull. Well, the Great Pyramid has two chambers. Most of you know there's the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber. And at the top of the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber, at the very top, going up, there's a shaft. Both the Queen and the Kings have this shaft going out of the pyramid. And the shaft, for a long time, they didn't even know it was there. And then they found the shaft, and they looked through it, and they didn't know what it was for. And somebody got the idea that they could date when the pyramid was built, because they decided that the shaft, when it was built, the shaft pointed to a certain star. All the records, the Egyptian records tell of these stars and explain the whole thing. But of course, the pyramids were built 10,500 BC. And so if you looked in, and there's a precession of the stars, so the stars change, so you can't look up through there and see that star anymore. So they put a computer image on it and shifted it back to 10,500, and they found that the Queen's Chamber points to Sirius, and the King's Chamber shaft points to Orion, to Orion's belt. So now there's a lot of stuff going around. People don't really know what this all means, and that's what we want to talk about in this video. To start with, there's so many things to talk about, but you see, the King and the Queen, of course, have children. Osiris is the one, and then there's Isis. Okay, and Osiris is the daddy, is the father. He's the one that gets chopped up into pieces, right? So this whole thing, you start realizing, is just a fertility thing, where Osiris is going to die, Isis is going to mourn for him, he's going to go into a coffin, he's going to be reborn. This is the same thing we have here in Christianity. I know a lot of you Christians say, oh, well, we're not pagans. We worship our Lord and His Son Jesus, and this is the Trinity, and do you realize this goes back to the ancient pantheon and mythological, it's the same story. Most of you Christians who find this out usually say, well, that's pagan stories, and they either copied it from us or something's going on, but it don't matter because we don't go by that pagan stuff. Fertility rites, right? Well, fertility means giving birth. Christianity is about giving birth, the new birth, being born again. Christianity is about Jesus, who died and conquered hell and was reborn and was resurrected. It's about the resurrection. Friends, it's the same story. Jesus had 12 disciples. There's always these 12, right? Jacob had 12 sons. We talked about how they had to be regathered. Osiris's body. What does all this mean? Well, the pyramids are talking about the original gods who fell. The Bible talks about these gods, the Titans and the Nephilim and so forth. What most people don't realize is that our Bible has a lot of problems. There's a lot of errors. Christians don't want to accept that. They say, well, if the Bible has errors, then our Father in heaven doesn't love us. If our Father in heaven cannot allow errors on the earth, then he wouldn't have made governments and confused their languages and allowed us to learn nonsense in school. He wouldn't have allowed Satan to come here. He wouldn't have allowed suffering. If our Father in heaven is going to make everything tidy and neat, then there wouldn't be most of the stuff we got on this earth. The fact is that the Bible, by divine power, was handed down to us in the form in which it's been handed down as 66 books. And that is a symbol. It's trying to tell you something's missing. You see, 6 is not complete. You've got to wait till you get to the 7th. Then you rest. Then it's complete. Our Bible doesn't have 70 books. It has 66. And it's telling you it's not complete. There's a lot that we don't know because they've taken a lot out. Now, so the flood happened about 10,500 BC. Well, that's when they built the pyramid. The flood happened about 11,000 years before Christ. You say, well, then the Bible's wrong then, because, if you add up all the dates in the Bible, it goes back to 4,000 BC. So that can't be right, Dave. Bible's got to be right. Okay, which Bible? The Septuagint version? It adds 100 years onto everybody's life. Instead of Serug and Peleg and, and all these different, or Pakshad, these guys lived 30 years, the Septuagint, the Sumerian, Josephus's writings adds 100 years. So instead of 35, it's 135. So whose dates are you going to go by? If you went by those dates, you'd go back quite a bit further. But you see, here's the problem. There were some errors. It's actually wrong in both accounts. What's happened is the original scriptures were much larger. We've got portions of that today. The Bible talks about it. The book of Jasher is a much larger version of Genesis. And so our Genesis is just an excerpt. It's what they kept of the original that they allowed you to see. And so it's got, in editing that, they took out stuff that they did. See, the whole thing started off to be accurate history, and then took a lot of it out to edit it so that you would think this or you'd think that. It's been manipulated. Jeremiah says that the scribes who wrote down the Bible lied to you. Your own Bible tells you that. So if you do believe in the Bible, you've got to believe that scripture, which says that the Jewish scribes lied and they erred. And it says, you think you've got Torah? No, it's the lying pen of the scribe. So it's a lie. So you've got to come to the grips with the fact that our Bible is only an excerpt, a Reader's Digest version, and what we have has been manipulated. So what's this 100 years extra? Well, the Septuagint is also of late date. So the original larger version that we don't have anymore because they burned it. They did not allow you to have that. Now we have something close to that. It's called the Sumerian Tablets. Basically, that is the original. That's probably not even the original, but that was as close to the original as we're going to get. And it adds a lot of years. It explains that Adam was made thousands and thousands of years ago. And it explains that the flood happened 11,000 BC. So why does the Bible got only 35 years when it's supposed to be 350 years? Because you see, you've got to add a 0 or 100. It's moved over 100. So if it says in our Bible, Abraham was 100 years old when he had Isaac, it's really, he was 1,000. So if you add a 0 to all those dates, every one of those dates, you come out to when they left Egypt about 1,300 years ago. That date at that point was 9,700 years instead of what our Bible has. From that point, it's in real time. So it's about 1,300 years after that. So it's about 11,000 BC. So this is what's happened. Is this just, when they edited the Bible and then burned that original stuff, we've got to figure out what it really said originally. So, according to the Egyptian legends and, of course, the Bible originally, but remember, the Bible only goes back to the flood. And scarcely at that. But before the flood, the Bible has almost no information. It doesn't really say much about it. There's only 10 chapters in the Bible before the flood. And most of that is just a list of people who lived, a story about the creation. Doesn't have a lot of the history or any kind of it just mentions in Genesis 6:4 something in one paragraph about the angels who fell and came and had relations with the daughters of men. They were the men of old, the men of renown. They had relations with the daughters of men. They did this and that, but it doesn't explain really what went on. Who these gods were, where they came from. Now, you can go into different parts of the Bible, like in Psalms. Let me see, I've got that here. Psalms 89:10 and Isaiah 51:9. Let's see. Yeah, Isaiah 51:9. And it talks about how God traversed the ocean or the sea or whatever and killed Tiamat. In our Bible, it calls it Rahab. This is the same story, but all we have left of this story in the Bible is the little poetic, verses. Talk about ancient days. Oh, remember when you did that and did this? Well, what is it really talking about? In one place, it calls it the dragon in Isaiah. He killed Rahab the dragon. Well, the dragon's in the Revelation, right? 7 heads and 10 horns. So now we know a little bit more about this dragon, this Satan. He's not some king who hates us and is trying to kill us all the time. It can be, but the dragon is the bad stuff, the material part of the universe. And we're all going through the material part of the universe. We've got to conquer it. See, we're killing the dragon. We're the dragon slayer. And how do we do that? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. But in that little poetic thing, it says that, the divine being slays this dragon. Well, in the Sumerian Tablets, it calls it Tiamat. And it has all this story. I mean, there's different ways. It's like symbolic little stories. Like we have gone through and talked about Jacob going down into Egypt and having 12 sons. Egypt represents going down into the physical realm, being divided up into 12. What's this 12 thing? That's us. We all have to go through the 12 signs of the zodiac. Is it literal? Do we only have 12 lives, or do we go to 12 different stars and then get reborn? No. None of this is really actually literal. Really got to look at this in a spiritual sense. Each one of these 12 is 12 bodies, 12 natures, 12 things that we have to overcome, 12 qualities. You got Leo, you got the eagle. These. See, the cherubim have 4 faces. We talked about this in another video, that the cherubim have a bull horns. They've got the feet of a bull. They've got the wings of an eagle. They've got the face of a lion sometimes. So, what is this? These are the 4 cardinal points of the astrological signs. The Leo. Sometimes in certain astrological charts, the eagle is a Scorpio. You have Leo, the eagle, Virgo, and the man, or the Aquarian man with the pitcher of water. So, the 4 signs are just the 4 cardinal points, but there's 12 of these natures. We've got to go through this thing and be divided up into these different emotional bodies that we have to overcome, experience, and live through. So each of us go into the house or the physical realm through one door. There's 12 doors. And these are 12 different bodies or natures that we go through, experience, and overcome. We go through Leo, we go through Aquarius, we go through all of them. And then we're put back and we ascend and we become a spiritual being. So this is what the pyramids are about. It's talking about the king's chamber and the queen's chamber. Well, you see, the chamber is the home, the physical part. The spirit goes into the chamber. But you have to have a union of the spiritual and the physical. The queen is the body, as I've said many times, and the mother is matter. And the king is the spiritual man who's united with matter. So the spiritual man, then, it would be the king's chamber, and the shaft in the king's chamber ascends unto the Orion's belt. Well, remember, we talked about how Sirius was only about 8 light years away. Well, Orion's belt is 1,000 light years away. It's a long ways. You see, that's where we begin, where we're spiritual. There's no physical. That's the spiritual man. But the divine being's not there. That's where his children are born into this particular level of existence. Because, you see, the New Testament says that our Father in heaven dwells in unapproachable light. See, if you go in from here, you go towards Sirius, then you go to the Orion's belt, that's down the Orion arm. And as you're going down that arm, you're going towards the center. And inside that galaxy, there's light. And it's unapproachable. You and I cannot attain unto it. Because even if we tried to do it physically, it would take so many light years we would just burn up in space. You couldn't get there. And the only way to get there is in the mind. It's through consciousness shifts, which we'll all attain to in zillions of years. But at this point in time, it's unapproachable. That's what the New Testament's saying. Our Father in heaven is light, the source of light, which is within us, deep within us, that we've got to try and remember. This is the whole process. We're split up into these different bodies to experience all of this and grow and reincarnate and to have this rebirth. And one day, we're going to return home to our Father in heaven. But you see, we have to have this marriage, the king and the queen's chamber. So, the spiritual rebirth, remember it says in Job, all the sons of God shouted for joy at the creation of the world, and we were called the morning stars. What is the morning stars? All the morning stars sang for joy. Remember, Jesus said, I am the bright and morning star. What is he talking about? A lot of people are very confused about this, because nowadays, we're in the modern, last couple hundred years, people have thought, well, maybe Venus is the morning star, because if you look in the morning, sometimes Venus rises up in the morning. First, it's a very bright star. It's not a star, though. It's a planet. But, you see, that doesn't work because Venus is also an evening star. This morning star thing is in the Bible. This is an ancient truth. And this is something that goes all the way back to the days of Egypt. They didn't think that Venus was the morning star then. They knew it was Sirius. Sirius would go away for 70 days. And then it would return in the morning sky. And when they saw the bright morning star return, they knew that life would be reborn in Egypt. And there would be floods and water and rain. And the sunshine would come out and everything would grow. And it was summertime. So you see, the bright morning star was Sirius. It's not Venus. And Jesus is proclaiming that I am the Son that is born from Mother Isis, the Virgin. That's where Jesus is from, and that's what he's claiming to be, the Son who was born from Sirius. That's Horus. That's the Christ. That's the inner spiritual man that's born from this union of our Father and Mother. And our Father is from Orion, and our Father is that spiritual source that's born in that nebula explosion. Our consciousness comes from the source, from the light, from the center of the galaxy. It begins to ascend outward. And when it finally gets to the Orion Nebula, which, remember now, our galaxy is about 100,000 light years across. So, from the center of the galaxy to the outer edge of the galaxy is about 50,000 light years. So, where Earth is about 25,000 light years in. We've got another 25,000 light years to the center where our Father in heaven started. So this Orion's belt is only 1,000 light years from us. So it's quite a ways out from the center. So what happens between our soul evolution from our Father in heaven unto this nebula where we explode into this consciousness and become aware of ourselves? The first birth of being the children of our Father in heaven. And it's at that place that we split up into these characters and we learn through these 12 houses. We enter into the gate through one of the 12 gates. And we reincarnate. And there's various planets that we go to. This isn't the only planet that we've been on. It's not the only planet we're going to live on in the future. We go we go into the material realm through one of the doors, and you partake of one of these natures and characters. You can be incarnated on this earth or other places. There are many places. But what finally happens is that we have the rebirth, the resurrection, and that's the Christ that is born in us that we're waiting for. So, Orion's belt, it's 3 stars. And it's really odd because there are 3 pyramids, large pyramids, in Egypt. And there's a bunch of smaller pyramids around it. Well, recently we found out, if you get up and look from above and you look down, every one of those pyramids is a star. And the 3 big ones in the middle is Orion's belt. And Orion's belt points to Sirius. There's 3 stars. Doop, doop, doop. It points to Sirius. And Sirius, then, is a very important place. Well, if you go to Egypt and you look at the 3 pyramids, it's in the exact shape of those stars. And there's 3 pyramids, the 3 large pyramids that are in exact position and are a replica of the 3 stars in Orion's belt. Now, one of those stars is slightly off. There's two pyramids in a straight line, and then the other one's slightly off. That's exactly the way it is with Orion's belt. And if you follow those 3 pyramids in a straight line, you go to Sirius, which is off to the left. Well, that's exactly what you see in Egypt. If you make a line from those 3 pyramids straight, you go to Heliopolis. And so Heliopolis was built to represent the star of Sirius. And that's where they put the great temple. And that is where the knowledge of everything was placed, to represent the fact that this is where we go to learn. We're in this constellation, or we're in this gravitational pull of Sirius. We're part of that area, and this is where the knowledge is put within us. We're the temple. And this is where Christ is going to be born. We're that holy temple. Sorry, I had to stop for a little bit. I had a phone call. But now the light's shining on me, and so it's going to look a little different than it was before. But so anyway, don't know really where I was, but I was going to talk to you about, I think there's a puzzle in people's minds about Nimrod. Because as Christians, we've just been, really duped. And we've got this story in our minds that's kind of causing us to not be able to make sense of all of this. We talked about how Nimrod's body was cut up by Shem. Shem cut his body up. And Nimrod is in the Babylonian pantheon. Well, in Hebrew it's Nimrod. But they called it Marduk. Well, in Egypt, it's Osiris. Now, Osiris is the Orion's belt. That's where we started off, where we go into the pieces. That's where we start getting our consciousness. And we start reincarnated on these different places as we're going and making our way out. So, Nimrod then represents the flesh. That part of our consciousness that is sort of wayward and rebellious, and we get all split up, get chopped up. But Isis is looking for us. We've got to be born again. We've got to see, now we're carnal, but we've got to be spiritual. We've got to find our spiritual self. And Horus is born. Christ is born. But the problem that is a little confusing is Shem's supposed to be the good guy. He's the high priest. And we always thought Nimrod was the bad guy. Well, yeah, he is. He's playing the bad guy. But there's not really any bad guys. See, our flesh is wayward, rebellious, but it's part of us. That's why a lot of people ask me, well, Dave, if the devil's so evil, why doesn't God just kill him? You're the devil. You want him to kill you? See, you've got the ego within you. God is merciful. Our Father in heaven is merciful. The divine being is allowing you free will. And for right now, you're in rebellion. If our Father in heaven decided to just off you right now, you wouldn't like that very much. He's patient with you. But through this consciousness shift, you're chopped up in all these little pieces and you're trying to overcome all this. You're going to be reborn. See, you're reborn as your own son. Isn't that weird? This is what happens. Cells split off and they become exact replicas, identical. This is the ancient wisdom is the macrocosm and the microcosm. There's the Adam Kadmon, or the heavenly man. And we're individual men that are going to be reborn in the exact same image. There's a lot of in-depth stuff in all of these ancient writings, and it's very symbolic. Until you understand, it's really just about our consciousness shift and our evolutionary process and this life that we have to live for thousands of years until we find our way home. Then we really don't understand it when we try to take it too literal. So what's really happening is we got Shem and we got Nimrod. There's the good guy and the bad guy. Well, the good guy and the bad guy is just, the son who's aware and conscious and is acting out that part of the play that knows what's going on, is being enlightened, is in dedicated position, is a priest. And then that part of our consciousness that is in ignorance, it needs to learn and grow. So you see, Marduk's not such a bad guy. He's just the ego. He's the son of Jehovah, son of Ea. And if you go back to the story in the Sumerian Tablets, there's a whole lot of stuff in there that's really kind of hard to straighten out and figure out. But Anu is not the original deity. Before him, there were other deities. And prior to Anu, there was Alalu. Now, Alalu was sort of thrown, he couldn't accomplish what, he wasn't able to save the planet Nibiru and get the gold, and he tried different things and got scientists together to try and figure out how to save the whole Nibirian race. And he failed. So Anu was upset and banished him, was going to put him to death, and he escaped in a ship and ended up going to Mars, and then he ended up going to Earth. Well, when he got to Earth, the story there is very vague, but he made some sort of a deal with Orion. Remember the King's Chamber? See, there's some very highly, highly advanced beings in the area of Orion's belt. And it appears that Alalu had some help that was even from an even higher divine source than Anu. And they didn't really know what was going on. So, Alalu had a daughter, since they couldn't figure out who's going to rule this planet. See, it sounds like some sort of... Same thing with Cain and Abel and Esau and Jacob. The story is it the spiritual man that's going to rule or the physical man? Well, sometimes the carnal man's going to rule for a while. He's going to screw things up. But eventually the spiritual man's going to take over. This is the same thing with the story. So, they couldn't figure out who was going to rule between Alalu and Anu, and they had this big fight. Well, it turns out that Anu's son, Ea, Jehovah, they made a deal that he would rule, so Anu's son would rule, but it would be Alalu's daughter. Now, you see, in our consciousness, we're thinking, oh, well, that means Anu won, right? His son got to be king. No, because in some cultures, it's the matriarch who rules the world. See, from Sirius, they had a very high queen. Her authority was great. And so, this daughter was really a very high princess. A queen, the queen of heaven. Isis. And so, she was the mother of Ea. And this means then that there's some controversy as to who really should rule the world. And something was being done on this planet that most of us humans didn't even know what was happening. Jehovah didn't even know what was happening. But he was put in place to sort of be a compromise between the two, the flesh and the spirit. The problem is Jehovah was more fleshly, and he was really mean and ornery, and he was learning and growing, and Marduk was bad, right? This is why another son comes along down the road who finally fits the bill, that fits the compromise. And this is the spiritual son that's finally born out of this arrangement of the flesh and the spirit. And so, no, Marduk's not the savior of the world. He wanted to be. He really just kind of screwed everything up and rebelled. So if you want to know why God allows, our Father in heaven allows all of this suffering on the earth, it's because your ego is trying to take over, and our Father in heaven allows your free will to do that. But it doesn't matter, because we'll all get there. We're going to learn, and eventually we're going to have a new birth, and our consciousness will awaken, and we'll understand. It's all just symbolic, friends. No worries. If you die, it's okay. You're going to wake up reborn. So there's no possibility that you're going to perish. Our Father in heaven loves everyone. He's got a plan, and it's a perfect plan. The Bible talks about that in Romans chapter 8. We are predestined, all of us, in our Father's purpose and our Father's plan to salvation. All of us. And there was also a plan that one son would be carnal and be rebellious and wayward. And this was the children of Anu through Ea for a while. And the Jews got this carnal nature and created these carnal rebellious laws that says, you will serve me and you will be good or I'll kill y'all. It's just a part of our evolution, part of our understanding. We had to be put under a tutor and grow and learn. And one day we grow up and we're the heir. And we find out, man, we're the heir of the whole thing. This is ours. We command that mountain to be moved and it will obey us. Because you see, we're not just this physical part. We're also spiritual. We've got access to our Father in heaven, which is right here in the temple. And that spiritual man's going to be born in this temple. I am the bright and morning star. Whoever believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Well, if you do, then you're saved. And if you don't, you will be. Just give it some time. Have no fear, little flock, for the Father has seen fit to give you the kingdom. There's nothing that anyone can do to take you out of the hands of our Father in heaven, who loves you and has you in his arms and has a plan that is just amazing. And if you make mistakes, he'll discipline you. That's what it is. It's discipline. It says he loves those that he disciplines. And if you're not a legitimate son, then that's not a good thing. But because you are a son, he disciplines you. He loves you. And even our Lord Jesus learned by the things in which he suffered. So friends, there's a whole lot more that I would like to go into. I think I'm probably running out of time in this video. I'm going to close it here. And we'll talk about this again tomorrow. I really have a lot of things I'd like to share with you about all this ancient historical information and mysteries and things that need to be told. It's time that we wake up, friends. So that's all I've really got to say today, friends. You guys, I hope you have a great week. This is David Bose. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.